and he's yours. I'm going to tell you, as a mom of 4, I cannot imagine what it took for her to put that baby in that Nile River with crocodiles, probably there in the plenty, because how many babies had been tossed into that river already? And yet Moses' mom put him there and received him back into her hands. Because God wasn't done with her shaping him in his life yet. She still had a purpose. In his hand, in her hands was still that son to help him become who he was going to be before she released him back to the princess, the Pharaoh's daughter. But that moment of trust and submission saved a nation. What's in your hand? Let's turn to someone that maybe you aren't quite as familiar with in 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel 25. We're going to look at verses 18 to 35 specifically. I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory here for the sake of time. We're not going to read all of this. But Abigail is a woman that has fascinated me. I wish that there were, I'm going to be honest, I wish there was more to her. I wish I knew what happened with her life in greater detail after this story. I'm just going to read. I just want you to listen. You can, I think Ryan has it along for you too here. So, give you a little bit of backstory. Abigail is Nabal's wife. We're in the time of King David. King David had been, he and his mighty men had been out in the fields where Nabal's shepherds had been keeping their flocks. And every time that David and his men were there, nothing came to harm Nabal's flocks. And so they sent word during the time of feasting. David sent one of his mighty men to go to Nabal and say, we'd like some food. You're preparing a feast. Can you give us food? And Nabal basically scorns David. Okay, so we're going to pick this up with Abigail, his wife. Then Abigail made haste. So she's just received this message. This is what your husband just did. Okay, he just scorned this man. Now they're coming to kill us. Like the message was, if we took 200 loaves and 2 skins of wine, 5 sheep that were already prepared, and 5 seahs of parched grain, and 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 cakes of fig, and laid them on donkeys. And she said to her young men, go on before me. Behold, I come after you. But she did not tell her husband Nabal. And as she rode on the donkey and came down under the cover of the mountain, behold, David and his men came down towards her, and she met them. Now David had said, surely in vain I have guarded all that this fellow has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that belonged to him, and he has returned me evil for good. God, do so to the enemies of David, and more also, if by morning I leave so much as one male, all who belong to him. When Abigail saw David, she hurried and got down from the donkey and fell before David on her face and bowed to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, on me alone, my Lord, be the guilt. Please, let your servant speak in your ears and hear the words of your servant. Let not my Lord regret this worthless fellow Nabal, for as his name is, so he is. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, your servant, did not see the young men of my Lord whom you sent. Now then, my Lord, as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, because the Lord has restrained you from blood guilt and from saving with your own hand, now let your enemies and those who seek to do evil to my Lord be as Nabal. And now let this present that your servant has brought to my Lord be given to the young men who follow my Lord. And please forgive the trespasses of your servant, for the Lord will certainly make my Lord a sure. And she's going to go on here. I want you to go down to verse 32 for a second. So she's offering, basically putting herself on the line, her life in her hands before David, asking, forgive my foolish husband. And David said to Abigail, this is verse 32, blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me. Blessed be your discretion, and blessed be you who have kept me this day from blood guilt. And he goes on. Did you catch what was in Abigail's hand? She had a lot of food. Something that clearly she had prepared, had spent time doing, was not something done just in the moment. I don't know about you, but I can't whip out a couple hundred loaves of bread in a moment's notice. But that's what was familiar to her. That's what she was used to doing as the wife of obviously a wealthy man. She was used to overseeing the servants and having this food prepared and ready to give commands. And because of her discretion in going, because of her preparation that she did, a household was saved. Blood guilt was spared from David. And what we see is that she actually ends up in David's household after Nabal dies. And Nabal doesn't die because of David. I want to point this out to you. If you keep reading this story, she waited until the next day, because when she went home after pleading for her family's life, with what was in her hands, the food she was familiar with, her husband was drunk, having a big party of celebration. And she waited until the next day to tell him, and Scripture tells us his heart became like stone when he heard the words of how she had spared them. And God says days later it was God that took Nabal's life. And eventually David hears of this, and what happened with him, Abigail ends up in his household. But what if her response, rather than saying, what do I have in my hands? What can I do in this moment? What if her response had been, I didn't cause this problem. Oh, my word. My husband is his name. Folly is what he does. And she went about her day. I'm going to submit to you, though Scripture doesn't say that, that was a burning bush moment for Abigail. That was a moment when God said, take the loaves that are familiar to you, and now they're my loaves that I'm going to use for my purposes. And she didn't withhold those from him. Turn back a book to Judges chapter 4. This is another kind of, I don't want to say hero, lest you think that I'm like looking for all of this, but it's just kind of another, oh, hold on, I have the wrong thing written down here. No, I don't. Judges 4. Okay. So we're in the time before Kings, when judges are ruling Israel, and Deborah, who is another fascinating woman to look at, and Barak, two people that God put in place to save Israel. But I'm going to show you, I'd like you to see today, the story of another what's in your hand moment here in Scripture. And we're going to pick up on verse 17. So Judges 4, verse 17. So Sisera, who Barak and Deborah and the army of Israel are going after. This is the man that they're looking for. And I'm going to tell you, Jael is the wife of someone in the Hebrew. Anyways, Sisera fled away on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. From there was peace between Jabin, the king of Hazar, and the house of Heber the Kenite. And Jael came out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Turn aside, my lord. Turn aside to me. Do not be afraid." So he turned aside to her and went to the tent, and she covered him with a rug. And he said to her, "Please, give me a little water to drink, for I'm thirsty." So she opened a skin of milk, and she gave him a drink and covered him. And he said to her, "Stand at the opening of the tent. And if any man comes and asks you, 'Is anyone here?' say no." But Jael, the wife of Heber, took a tent peg and took a hammer in her hand. And she went softly to him and drove the peg in his temple until it went down into the ground while he was lying fast asleep from weariness. And so he died. And behold, as Barak was pursuing Sisera, Jael went out to meet him and said, "Come, I will show you the man whom you are seeking." And so he went into her tent, and there lay Sisera dead with a tent peg in his temple. Okay, why am I bringing this up? I know not normally a story that we would be talking about on church, right? Sometimes we need to go back and refresh ourselves with those stories from the Bible. I say stories loosely. I really hate the word because of how our nation has turned the word story to kind of feel like something false, okay? This record in history that is recorded for us of someone's life. This woman that lives in a tent, holding a tent peg and a hammer in her hand, is a common occurrence. It's something she's used to doing. She's used to helping set up the tent, which means if you don't want your tent to blow over, she is strong with wielding that hammer and has precision with hitting that tent peg. It is a common tool she is used to holding in her hand. I don't think she woke up that morning and said, I wonder who I'm going to drive this tent peg through their temple today. I don't think that was what Jael was after. But in a burning bush moment in her life, when the enemy of her people came in and she had him there, and God said to her, we don't have it in scripture, but I submit to you, God said to her, this is your moment. She didn't say, God, I don't know if I'm prepared enough. God, I don't know if I'm strong enough to wield that hammer and do what you want me to do. She didn't sit there and wrestle. Scripture tells us with purpose. She softly approached him. Could you imagine? What if he wakes up? And yet Scripture records that Jael did what the Lord wanted her to do with what was in her hand. One blow, and a nation was saved. She didn't think about that. I don't think that was in her morning quiet time. God, am I going to be the one you're going to use to save my nation today? She just did what she needed to do in the moment with what was comfortable and familiar to her. Okay. Lest you think that it's only the females in Scripture that God used to do extraordinary things with the common, let's turn to the New Testament for a minute. There's a lot of figures in the Old Testament. I'm going to give you some names to go if this is turning